Welcome back to Swine TV. Breaking story today, transmission of porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome virus in domestic pigs via oral ingestion of feed material. Dr. Scott D., welcome back.
Thanks, Jim. It's good to be back. I've been gone for a little bit, so I'm happy to be talking with you again.
We've been busy with a new study. There's new knowledge brought to light here that's never been demonstrated before. Can you talk about this study?
Yeah, going back in a little bit historically, there's always been this case in the swine industry with some farms breaking with PRRS, and nobody can figure out how it got in. And they're filtered, and they've got all the trucks washed and all the people stuff, and everything's done right. And you can't find any breaches, but it's a small subset of farms, but it's lingering and it's very nagging and it's very irritating if you're a veterinarian and trying to keep your herds clean of this virus. And it's such a bad virus these days. It's such a detrimental thing. So, and we've experienced that too at Pipestone. We'd have these bulletproof farms out in western South Dakota, or very isolated parts of the United States, all of a sudden get PRRS, and they did everything they could to keep it out. So this was the actual case I encountered while I was just doing my job right in that same jurisdiction. This was a very well biosecure farm, just top-notch management, filtered, et cetera, et cetera. All of a sudden it got PRRS. And what was really interesting was that the manager picked up on it while there were just a few sows off feed. He thought maybe there was mycotoxins in the bin. And so he shut the feed line off. And then he gave me a call. So with that, he did two really important things. He preserved the actual sample, the feed in the bin that usually gets eaten or thrown out, and then new feed comes in and you can't figure it out. And then he called me, and I happened to be about 10 minutes away. And so I went to the farm with some sampling materials, and we can talk more about that. And we worked this out, but that's the history that kind of led up to this. It was very fortuitous that he was so observant to a few sows off feed, stopped the line, didn't let any more feed get consumed or thrown out or refilled. If he hadn't done that, we couldn't have reported what we reported. So I don't know if the readers know that, but that's something that's really important to know.
So he has a top-notch biosecurity program, but he's still alert and paying attention to the fine details. He picked up on it, got you involved. So in essence, this provides evidence on a new risk factor for transmission of PRRS.
Now, that's a big deal. We went to the farm, and I think the listeners probably remember my PED story in 2014, January, where the same thing happened. And we went and we sampled inside the bin walls of these index bins that were feeding these index cases with a paint roller and a long pole, climbing up on the top and just kind of scraping the interior walls, finding PED and then reproducing infectivity the first time that had been done. We took the same approach here. We got the same materials. We went to the farm, we sampled the inside of the bin, collected feed from that offending tonnage, and found that it was positive for PRRS virus. So that was the field aspect of the case, and the virus matched the pig virus. So we connected those dots. Then we fed it back to pigs experimentally and showed transmission to naive animals. So it's the first time it's ever been shown in a field case that infectious virus was in a feed bin and it could be fed back to pigs and demonstrate PRRS. So it's like you don't get this type of conclusivity very often. This is like a black and white. There's no discussion about how the virus got in the farm. And so it's the first time it's ever been shown in a field case. We've done it experimentally several times, but in a field case, it's the first time it's ever been demonstrated. And so to me, it sets a new standard for a new risk factor, to your point, is we now have to start to pay attention to not just dirty trucks, people screwing stuff up, contaminated air, supplies. We got to start thinking about feed for this virus, as well as, obviously, as we know, many others. So to me, it's just more evidence of the risk of feed as a vehicle for viral movement.
Did it surprise you, Scott?
Yes and no. I've always wondered about this because, it kind of makes sense. Why wouldn't PRRS transmit through feed? And a lot of the previous publications on this question showed negative results. And if you look at those publications, they're using very insensitive assays, virus isolation, trying to grow the virus. That's really hard to do in PRRS in feed. And everyone just assumed, including me a little bit, that this just doesn't happen. There's PD for sure, ASF for sure, blah, blah, blah. But this is different. And so it was yes and no, because once we had real strong CT values in the feed, and then we fed it to pigs, and boom, it was kind of like, okay, here we go. So really fortuitous, just happenstance to have this manager, as good as he is, make that phone call so we could get this done.
Being proactive. Now let's talk about the paper a little bit. So there's outcomes. The outcomes are strengthened as the paper describes both a field phase and an experimental phase, Scott?
Yeah, usually, you might have a field observation, then you go off and you do some experiment and you might reproduce something. But the connectivity of the field event and the lab event in this case was really cool, because the samples we took from the bin, just like we did in PED back in January 2014, were the same samples we fed to the pigs in the laboratory phase. And so that demonstrated the virus was alive. It just wasn't a PCR positive. It showed it was infectious because those pigs got PRRS. And so when you can kind of connect those dots, that's not an easy thing to do. And then you get to the point where there's no discussion here. So it's kind of where that, I think, is right now. It's not predicting how frequent it can happen, but it's definitely saying it can happen. It's not a lab experiment anymore. It's a real field event.
So this is further justification for the use of feed mitigants, right?
No question. I mean, feed mitigants have been so protective for so many different viruses: PED, ASF, Seneca, you name it. And now there's another one that we've tested PRRS against many of the same mitigants that we've used in the feed over and over, and they neutralize PRRS really well. So it's just another reason to use a mitigant, because not only you have PD protection, you have potentially Seneca protection, you could have ASF protection. Hopefully we'll never have worry about that. But now you're going to have PRRS protection too. So yeah, it just kind of says, hey, it's a good thing to do. You're getting more bang for your buck with this information.
So this continues to add to the list of producers of things they need to worry about and focus on for biosecurity. Like, what message do you have for people are feeling the effects of, like, this is a lot? How can they manage this, Scott? Because the gentleman you talked about was very observant. And what if somebody else is observant and misses this? So, like, what do we need to do?
Well, if I was a producer and I saw this paper, if I didn't already have a feed mitigant in my diets for my breeding herd, I'd put it in, because this says I don't have to worry about it anymore. If you got this product in your bin, it's going to neutralize these viruses. And now you just got another one on the list it's going to neutralize. So you're getting more bang for your buck. So to me, it's just like a no-brainer. Don't even argue with it anymore. Put it in. It's going to help you in many ways. And so that's would be my message to a producer, if they're kind of on the fence whether they should use it or not. I mitigate or not. I don't care which one they use. Everyone we've tested has had very good effect on PRRS, so they can use whatever they want. But it's a good thing. It'd be a good thing to do.
Do you think this has happened before then?
Oh, I'm sure. Many times, I'm sure. Yeah, the only way we were able to demonstrate this is because I got that phone call, and that manager didn't let the rest of that feed in the bin get consumed and then refilled with clean feed, which would have, obviously we couldn't have tested the bin then because it was been all full of new feed. That's the only way we could show this. It's same in the PD story. We just had the timing was right to go to the farm just at the time the thing was happening, the few cases of infection, and we had access to that interior feed material, and we could sample it. And the way we sampled it was very novel because with the paint roller and the long pole, you're kind of sampling the tonnage rather than just taking a grab sample, a pound or a kilogram or two. That's the worst way to sample feed for viruses. You never know. There's false negative potential is extraordinarily high. So it kind of tells me that independent of what you think, put it in because it's going to give you a lot of protection down the road. Use whatever one you want.
Do you have any predictions for how frequent this could happen?
Are really hard to say because this is a N of one, and to really assess it, you'd have to repeat this, and so have the chance to go to the multiple farms and have this perfect timing. It's almost impossible to do. And a lot of people say, "Well, I've sampled feed and I never found PRRS." Well, how did you do it? Well, I grabbed a few pounds out of the bin and blah blah blah. Well, that doesn't count if you don't do it this way. So it's really, but that's really hard to do, and so it's hard to measure the frequency. But I don't know if we really need to care about the frequency. This paper shows it can happen, and why mess around? If it can happen, let's just get on board and do something about it. That'd be my message.
Any final thoughts, Scott?
No, I think it just kind of brings more knowledge to the table, and again, it's brand new stuff, and it needs to be taken seriously. And I'm really hoping that people will do that. And this could explain a lot of these tough breaks out in very remote areas where everything is set up right, but the virus still gets standing. It could be the answer to how that happens. And so the good news is, if you're putting a feed mitigant in already for PED, you're going to have, it's going to work for PRRS too, most likely. So it's just kind of answers the question, and there's really no more debate. It's just kind of like done deal. And so that's why I wanted to write the paper and get it out there so everyone can see it. It's an open access journal, the JAMA. Everybody can read it for free. And I appreciate talking to you and raising awareness through your platform that this is, I think, a breakthrough that we've never had before.
Well, Dr. Scott D., thanks for bringing this to light today.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the time.